Okay, good morning. It's been one of those weeks. We've had a lot of those weeks lately where we have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday and a Friday slide, Saturday, Sunday. I do not like the time schedule that we are on right now. It is very fun if you have a lot to get accomplished. So if you have any questions, put them in the live chat. It may take a couple minutes for them to show up. I will answer as I have the ability. It's been a heck of a week. We've seen some pretty massive upheaval in Belarus, which had they have a not particularly democratic government, and we've seen some major outpouring from their citizens, and they're kind of done. And it breaks my heart a little bit to see how long it's going to take before we push back and say we're not doing this anymore. We like democracy. But keep an eye on Belarus. It is a obviously much smaller country geographically, and that's part of our problem with protest is we have a huge, very spread out country, most of which is not population dense. I mean, we have population dense towns, but most of this country, I've driven cross country quite a few times, and it's just not a very population dense country. So, when you see these things happening in other places, it's sort of hard to picture why we don't have some of that same force. A lot of it is we're kind of lazy and content as a country. We certainly have problems in this country. We have poverty. We are definitely sliding towards an authoritarian regime. We're in it with fascism, but relative comfort. We're not like some of the substantially more poor countries where they're not fighting with food insecurity quite the same way we are. A lot of our country has semi moderate climates, and so there are places where you're not out in the desert in most of the country, or you're not in a frozen tundra for a lot of the time. So we have some natural things that sort of protect us. We also have a different standard of living in a lot of countries, but our standard of living isn't that far off for indentured servitude for an awful lot of our population, which is a problem. Um, as I was getting this set up and discovering Twitter's very fun new autocorrect feature on hashtags, which means you have to retype a tweet quite a few times, at least if you're on a laptop. Um, it popped up that the Republican and the Democrat in this race are millionaires. Yeah, totally. The person coming from the Speaker of the House, that is a job you can only do in Maine if you don't need income. It is a job that doesn't pay well. It is part time, and it makes it very difficult to have any full time job. So you basically are limited to doing that job if somebody else is covering your expenses. You're independently wealthy, you're retired. We should probably have a full time legislature. A lot of the state problems you see me complaining about, if I could afford to, feed my children and pay my bills, I would seriously consider going and joining the state legislature, but I just can't. It's irresponsible of me financially to say, "Oh, kids, you don't need to eat," or "Who needs to pay student loans?" It's not a responsible space for me to run for state legislature, which is a shame because a lot of the real issues that impact people on a daily basis are state legislature. For example, if you are in a situation where we're putting people in jail for um, drinking in public. People who drink in public who get tickets for that, that's a crime of poverty. If you can afford to drink in a bar, that's not illegal. You drink in a bar or restaurant, that's not illegal. Drink on your own property, that's not illegal. If you have no place to drink, that's illegal. And in the state of Maine, we regularly put people in jail for that. If you are someone who is doing low dollar thefts at a grocery store because you need to eat, you don't have access to a food pantry, and maybe you have something else going on there besides poverty. You might also have addiction or mental health. Often those are intertwined. Again, it's not uncommon, especially if you're a habitual offender, to be put in jail for 60 days or 6 months. And we have felonies that occur after your third infraction, you become a habitual offender. So you can get a felony in the state of Maine for stealing a $2 item. It's insane. And those are things that could be fixed at the state legislature, but because we have some very wealthy people there, I think that they just don't have any frame of reference for how destructive that can be if you're in poverty, and how it's not necessarily beneficial for society at all. So, um, part of this run has been about what does it take to get people in the middle class or who have experienced poverty? What does it take to get those people in office? And I am middle class. I've had periods in my life where my family had a lot of money. I've had periods in my life where my family spent on food stamps, and our a lot of money is nowhere near a lot of America's a lot of money, but comfortable enough. Um, and that was when I was a child. Both of those situations were when I was a child. As an adult, I've been food insecure. I've not known how I was going to pay my mortgage. Um, I've dug through my couch cushions to make sure I had tampons. I've been there, and I think having people in our legislature, whether it's state or federal, who haven't had the opportunity, and it sounds like it's a lack of opportunity, but it's really an opportunity to have that exposure to what happens when you don't have the money. I don't think you can make good law if you don't have people at the table that know what it's like to not have the money, to not have the resources. It's very easy in this country to be wealthy. It's very easy to be comfortable. You can buy your way around so many consequences in the legal system. Um, there is, currently no time in our lifetimes where having an ample amount of money still placed you in a position where you were food insecure. So, if you have the resources, you can buy almost anything in this country. And that is who's governing us, is the people who can. So, one of the reasons I've gotten a lot of pushback from people, oh my gosh, just drop out. Why are you fighting this in court? You're still going to run as a write-in, even like you didn't make ballot. We don't have that sort of classic moderate Maine independent who's very pragmatic with budgets. We don't have that in any of our federal races if I'm not there. And that is something that Maine voters deserve. So yesterday I filled out the paperwork to sort of, hedge my bets. We've still got that court case going, filled out paperwork to run right in and overnighted that, assuming it shows up to Augusta. So they should have that by Monday. Also scan them a copy just in case. I will be available as a write-in for anyone who wants to write in. We have some real great opportunities with that. I'll loop back around to that. What we saw this week, and this should have happened sooner, and I was keeping an eye on the mail for a couple of reasons. I'm an attorney, so my notices from court come by mail. They don't come electronically, as well as I was waiting for nomination petitions to come back, and a lot of my petitions did not come back on time, even though they were mailed with plenty of time to get there. I still don't know that I would have gotten to the full 4,000, but I would have been a lot closer. So I've got a stack on my desk of envelopes that came back after the deadline and after I had to turn in signatures. And a lot of those also didn't get certified by the towns because maybe they got to the town in time and then just didn't process them in time, or they were mailed with plenty of days to get to the town in time and just didn't get there in time. So a lot of frustration around that. So we know, and we have known for a few weeks, it's been going on since at least June, that the post office has been purposefully slowed down, not by postal workers, but by administration. And there was some pushback. So some pictures were being circulated that showed, people ripping out, postal boxes. And so we're being told two things. There's not enough mail and volume to justify all the sorting machines and all the mailboxes, but also we can't handle the volume and timing of the election because we're just going to be at capacity. So those are sort of semi-mutually exclusive things that if you get into the business justification, there's certainly ways to say, the ballot is a limited duration event, which they absolutely could staff up for. And if they truly needed to liquidate some some equipment, could do, a few month delay, but they're not interested in that. Our president has come right out and said, I don't want you guys to vote. It's okay if I vote by mail as the executive, but I don't want you guys to vote by mail. And they're trying to draw this distinction between absentee voting and vote by mail, and generally they're the same thing. So, excuse me just a second. Our cat is there. We go. Our dramatic cat is destroying furniture, which is sort of her specialty. So, that and potatoes. So, our president is saying, I don't want people who are not on my team to vote. And they're saying it right out loud. I mean, this is voter suppression. And one of the things you'll hear me talk about is, um, Republicans like to control the vote with voter suppression. Democrats like to control the vote with candidate suppression. They're different trends, and they're certainly not universal within the parties, but that's how they tend to manifest their desire to control the vote. So, and there is the theatrical cat. So we have Republicans who apparently haven't, gerrymandering hasn't served their purposes substantially enough, and now they want to control the vote. And the fact that we've gotten to a point where either party is allowing the postal service to be torn apart to try and get a voting advantage is just it's obscene. It's obscene. Republicans should not be tolerating that. I know very few people that consider the postal service any kind of political entity, and it is a widely beloved institution that is enshrined in our Constitution. And it's one of the few places where people really tend to agree. Republicans and Democrats tend to agree that the postal service does great things, right? Like, that's where everybody's grandma gets their prescriptions, and how you mail cards, and how the courts send out notices, and how you serve people, and how you get your bills, and how you pay your rent for a lot of people. So it is probably the most efficient use of public good in our entire country in the postal service. I can get a letter to middle of nowhere, Alaska from Maine for 55 cents. And that is, true efficiency that we deliver to every single person in this country at a reasonable rate. And it keeps our communities connected. So, what I wanted to loop back around on, what can we do? Because it's very frustrating. Like, what can we do to help this? So we have a real opportunity. If you see a lot of the fighting right now, there's a lot of fighting from moderate to left, not as much on the right, but there's also some disconnect on the right. So if you'll see a lot of people that maybe are Republican, but are really uncomfortable with Trump, or are, maybe they don't even call themselves Republican anymore, they're conservative, really uncomfortable with Trump, definitely not interested in going to a Democrat. You'll see a lot of people who are, too progressive for the Democrats and want to have candidates that are either really progressive or are willing to say, look, at least I'll have a conversation about some of this stuff. And there might be some merit. I think that your perspective is something that could improve my stance. And then there's a whole bunch of moderates like me that are saying, like, why are we trapped between these two rich people? I want somebody who knows what it's like to have to pick between, like, childcare and housing, or to stretch my budget, or I want somebody who knows what it's like to have to tell your children, sorry, you don't get a birthday this year because I have to make sure you eat, or we're going to go shop at Goodwill because that's what the budget allows, if it allows anything. So there's a lot of people that are really discontent. There's a lot of people that don't like the Trump camp. There's a lot of people who are really unhappy with the presidential and vice presidential nominations from the Democratic Party. And what I'd like to do is, instead of taking that discontent, and a lot of it, and using it to sort of rip apart what we got going on, why don't we channel it? You are not going to convince somebody who is a conservative or Republican, generally, that they're just going to love Joe Biden. Even if they vote for Joe Biden sort of begrudgingly, not a whole lot of people are going to be there actively stumping, but maybe they want a way to be involved. You're not going to convince somebody who has a different political ideology, who's more moderate or on the right, by telling them, oh my gosh, if you don't vote for my candidates, that's treason. You're a Nazi fascist if you don't vote for my candidates. They may agree with you to some extent, and they may even be semi-receptive to the message, but being on the receiving end of that doesn't make you want to agree with the person saying it. So let's find all of those very discontented people, even if you're one of the ones that's not disconnected. Let's find them and channel them towards this campaign. We have ranked choice voting. We have a way where we can work on the mail, because main raising, the way that people get to know my campaign, almost all those sales go through the mail. Um, we can work on the mail. We can channel frustration to something more productive that isn't going to tell them, oh my gosh, if you don't vote my way, you're a horrible person, whatever that way is, whether it's Republican or Democrat. Let's get them out of that and let's find a productive place to channel that. So that's what, I've been getting in a little bit of bickering online with that lately, where people are saying, oh my goodness, you know, um, these people are just not going to do what I want. Well, why don't you, instead of saying you're not going to do what I want and having that as a point of tension, let's have it as a point of redirection. So when you see those conversations going on, suggest, hey, you know what? Why don't you go connect with Tiffany? She might be the candidate you're looking for, and she won't even hit you up for money, but she is going to ask you to invest in Maine. It'll help our economy during the pandemic. A lot of the stuff that people can buy from Maine is stuff they'd buy anyway, and maybe it's the same price or even a little more or less. But if somebody's doing their grocery shopping, buy some jam from a Maine vendor. Tell them that I wouldn't take your campaign contribution and that I asked you to please invest in Maine. Leave that note when you're making the purchase. And the worst thing we'll do is help some people, right? If 10 people do this, we've done some good in the world. If a couple 100,000 of us, and there is definitely that much political discontent, engage in this, I think that we show a whole bunch of things. We show that you don't have to be a millionaire to win, and we show that ranked choice voting works really well. Um, and we show the political system that all of the stuff that you're doing, all of the commercials, all of the waste, all of the telling us that we don't have a right to participate in politics if we're not wealthy or incredibly resourced, it's not true. So let's change the system that way. I haven't gotten any questions this morning, so I'm going to wrap it up because I have not yet had my tea and I definitely need caffeine. We'll talk on Tuesday. If you have any questions, hit me up online. You can always find me on Twitter at Tiffany Bond. Email me through the website, bond4.me. And those are the two easiest places to find me. Going to keep doing 2 town halls a week. Got to keep doing Maine raising. This month, we're also trying to help teachers get ready for remote learning. So keep an eye. I'm trying to every day or so put up a Donors Choose project and see if we can get that funded. So let's get some of those taken care of. That's another just awesome Maine raising. If you don't want to shop, throw a few dollars at that, or food insecurity or domestic violence shelters. There's so much need in Maine right now. We're a very economically disadvantaged state. So it's beautiful here, but we're also somewhat poor. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your Saturday.